She just traded forever for a joyride.
The helmet hit the asphalt with a hollow thunk, and I knew my marriage was over. I'd been filling the tow truck at Murphy's Shell when I spotted Kara across the lot, laughing with some leather-jacketed fool beside a gleaming Harley. Duke Renner. I knew the name from bar talk around town. Local hotshot who thought chrome and noise made him somebody special. But it wasn't the bike that caught my attention. It was how my wife's face lit up when he tossed her that helmet. 22 years of marriage, and she'd never smiled at me like that. Not once. "Ray, you okay, man?" Tommy Rusk's voice snapped me back. The gas nozzle was clicking off in my hand, diesel splashing my boots. "Yeah, just thinking." I hung up the pump, eyes still on Kara, sliding that helmet over her blonde hair. She looked like some teenager sneaking out past curfew. Duke fired up the Harley with a roar that rattled windows 3 blocks away. Kara wrapped her arms around his waist, pressed tight against his back, and they disappeared down Main Street in a cloud of exhaust and bad decisions. I climbed into my truck and sat there for a full minute, hands gripping the steering wheel. 41 years old, owner of Callan's Auto Repair, respected in this town, built everything from nothing with these 2 hands, including a family I thought mattered. The smart play would have been to follow them. Confront her right there on whatever back road they'd chosen for their little joyride. But I'd learned something in 2 decades of fixing broken engines. You don't start yanking parts until you know what's really wrong. So I drove back to the shop, past the faded sign that read, "Honest work, fair price," past the bay doors where I'd taught our kids how to change oil and check tire pressure, past the life I'd built while apparently my wife decided it wasn't enough. The afternoon stretched long and quiet. I worked on a transmission rebuild, hands moving automatically while my mind replayed that scene at the gas station, the way Duke had looked at her, the way she'd looked back. By 5 o'clock, the other mechanics had gone home. The shop felt empty, echoing with the tick of cooling metal and my own breathing. I locked up and headed home to our split level on Elm Street, wondering if Kara would be there or if she was still wrapped around some stranger's bike. She was home, sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Her hair was helmet messy, but she'd tried to fix it. "How was your day?" she asked without looking up. "Fine. Yours?" "Boring. Grocery shopping. Errands." She glanced at me briefly, then back to her screen. "Dinner's in the fridge if you want to heat it up." I studied her face for tells, the flush in her cheeks, the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes, all the small signs I'd been too busy or too trusting to notice before. "Thanks," I said. She nodded and went back to her phone, probably texting him already, planning the next ride, the next lie, the next piece of our life she'd trade away for whatever thrill Duke Renner promised. I heated up the casserole and ate alone while she disappeared upstairs for a shower. When I heard the water running, I stepped outside and checked her car. The engine was cold, stone cold. She'd been gone for hours. 2 weeks passed like a slow-motion car wreck. Kara started taking errands that lasted half the day. She'd come home windblown and flushed, making excuses about traffic or long lines at stores I knew well she hadn't visited. I said nothing. Just watched and waited. Then I noticed her grandmother's necklace was missing. It had sat in our bedroom jewelry box for 15 years. White gold with a small diamond cluster, nothing fancy but worth maybe $800. More importantly, it was the only thing Kara had left from her grandmother who raised her after her parents died. "Where's the necklace?" I asked her Thursday morning as she rushed around getting ready for another mysterious day out. "What necklace?" She didn't look up from digging through her purse. "Your grandmother's, the white gold one." "Oh, that!" She waved dismissively. "It's in for repair." The clasp was loose. "Which jewelry store?" Now she looked at me, irritation flashing in her brown eyes. "Does it matter? It'll be back in a week or 2. Just curious." "Peterson's downtown? Happy?" Peterson's had been closed for 6 months. Everyone in town knew that. I let it slide and headed to work, but the lie sat in my gut like spoiled food. When Tommy showed up around lunch with parts for the Henderson truck, he seemed nervous, fidgeting with his ball cap. "Ray, I gotta ask you something," he said finally. "Shoot. You send your wife over to my shop for work?" I set down my wrench. "What kind of work?" "Motorcycle tires, expensive ones." "She had this Harley with her? Said you recommended me for the mounting?" Tommy scratched his neck. "Thing is, those tires cost more than most people make in a week. Just seemed weird, you know." My chest tightened. "When was this?" Yesterday afternoon, real nice bike, but the guy with her? Tommy shrugged. Let's just say he didn't look like your usual customer. Thanks for the heads up. Sure thing, man. Just didn't want any confusion. After Tommy left, I sat in my office staring at the phone. Part of me wanted to call Kara, demand answers. But the other part, the part that had learned patience from 20 years of diagnosing engine problems, knew better. Around 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed. Text message from Tommy. Thought you should see this. The photo showed a crumpled pawnshop receipt tucked into a motorcycle saddlebag. I zoomed in on the details. Sterling necklace, /diamond cluster, $450. Transaction hash A 4471, 450. For an $800 necklace, she'd practically given it away. I saved the photo and leaned back in my chair. The pieces were falling into place now. The helmet, the errands, the missing necklace, the expensive motorcycle tires. My wife was funding some biker's lifestyle with our family heirlooms, but I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof that would hold up in court. That evening, I drove downtown to Reliable Pawn. The shop had an online catalog system they'd installed a few years back, letting customers browse items from home. I pulled up their website and searched for women's jewelry. There it was, listed 3 days ago. Vintage white gold necklace, diamond accents, $750 OBO, sold. Someone had already bought it. Probably melted down or shipped off to some collector who'd never know it once belonged to a grandmother who worked double shifts to raise an orphaned granddaughter. I sat in my truck outside the pawn shop for 20 minutes, engine idling, thinking about confrontations and consequences, about lawyers and custody battles and the way our kids would look at me when their world fell apart. Then I went inside and bought the most similar necklace they had. Not to replace what she'd stolen, that was impossible, but as evidence, as proof of what she'd thrown away. The clerk was helpful, chatty about the jewelry trade and how much estate pieces were worth these days. When I mentioned the necklace that had sold recently, he nodded knowingly. Yeah, that was a nice piece. Lady seemed in a hurry to sell, though. Probably could have gotten more if she'd shopped around. Some people need cash fast, I said. True enough. Cash only, too. Said she didn't want any paper trail. I thanked him and left with the replacement necklace in a small velvet box. Not for Kara, she'd already made her choice, but for the lawyer I was going to need. The security camera system at Murphy's Shell had been my handiwork 3 years ago. Same with the setup at Tony's Hardware and the bank across from Iron Run Tavern. Small town networking. I fix your transmission, you let me install your cameras, we all help each other out. What most folks didn't realize was that I'd kept access to several of those feeds. Not for any shady reason, just professional courtesy in case systems needed updates or troubleshooting. The kind of thing that comes in handy when your wife starts lying about where she spends her afternoons. Saturday morning, I told Kara I was heading to the shop for a few hours of paperwork. True enough, though the paperwork involved logging into camera feeds rather than invoices. Iron Run Tavern sat on the corner of 3rd and Maple, a brick building that had been everything from a hardware store to a diner before settling into its current incarnation as the place where bikers and roughnecks went to drink away their paychecks. The camera across the street had a perfect view of the front door and parking area. I pulled up the archived footage from the past 2 weeks, fast-forwarding through hours of nothing until movement caught my eye. There, Tuesday afternoon, 2:17 p.m. Kara's red Honda pulling into the lot, parking beside a familiar Harley. I watched her climb out, smooth her hair, check herself in the car's side mirror. She looked nervous, excited, like a kid about to sneak into a movie theater. Duke emerged from the tavern in his leather jacket and jeans, all swagger and confidence. They didn't kiss, not where the cameras could see, but the body language was clear. The way she angled toward him, the casual touch of his hand on her back as they walked inside. I logged the timestamp and moved forward. Same thing Wednesday at 1:45 p.m., Thursday at 3:22 p.m., yesterday at 2:05 p.m., a pattern. Always early afternoon, always when the kids were in school and I was busy at the shop. Always ending with them walking out together 2 or 3 hours later, Kara looking disheveled and Duke looking satisfied. I copied the video files to an external drive, then spent another hour watching traffic patterns around the tavern. Busy lunch crowd, dead afternoons, evening rush of regulars. The kind of place where gossip traveled fast and secrets didn't stay secret long. By the time I locked up the shop, I had enough evidence to confront Kara directly, but confrontation was just noise unless you had leverage. And leverage meant lawyers, documentation, and a plan that went beyond just catching her cheating. That evening, I called Meredith Lang. Meredith had handled our wills and the business incorporation papers when I'd started the auto shop. Smart, thorough, and tougher than most of the men in this town gave her credit for. If I was going to war, I needed someone who knew how to win. Ray, it's been a while. What can I do for you? I need to ask about custody law. Hypothetically. A pause. Hypothetical situations involving your own children. Maybe. Come see me Monday, my office. And Ray, bring documentation of whatever's going on. Courts don't care about hurt feelings. They care about facts. I hung up feeling like I'd just started an engine I couldn't turn off. But some engines needed to run, needed to burn through all the built-up carbon and sludge before they could work clean again. Sunday dinner was a strange, quiet affair. Kara picking at her food, checking her phone every few minutes. Our kids, Emma, 16, and Jake, 12, chattering about school and friends, while their parents sat like strangers at opposite ends of the table. "Dad, can you help me with my car next weekend?" Emma asked. "It's making a weird noise when I turn." "Sure, sweetheart, probably just needs new CV joints." Kara looked up from her phone. She's too young to be driving that much anyway. She's 16. I was working on cars at her age. That's different? How? Kara shrugged, already looking back at her screen. It just is. Later, after the kids had gone upstairs to homework and video games, I found myself standing in the garage, staring at the wall of tools I'd collected over 2 decades. Every wrench, every socket, every specialty tool earned through hard work and honest dealing. Tomorrow, I'd start taking apart something more complicated than any engine I'd ever rebuilt. Tomorrow, I'd find out just how much my marriage was worth, and whether the woman I'd loved for half my life thought it was worth less than a tank of gas and a set of motorcycle tires. Monday morning came with rain and the kind of gray sky that made everything look older than it was. I dropped the kids at school, drove to the shop, and spent 2 hours pretending to work on Billy Henderson's transmission while actually watching the clock. At 11:30, I locked up and drove downtown to Meredith Lang's office. Her building sat wedged between the pharmacy and an insurance agency, all brick and narrow windows that made it look more like a fortress than a law firm. Inside, the waiting room smelled like leather and old coffee. Legal magazines fanned across a table that had seen better decades. Ray. Meredith emerged from the back office, extending a firm handshake. She was maybe 50, gray-streaked hair pulled back severely, wearing a navy suit that meant business. "Come on back." Her office was organized chaos law books stacked on every surface, files arranged in what seemed like random piles but probably made perfect sense to her. She gestured to a client chair across from her desk. "So, custody issues." I pulled out the external drive and the pawn shop receipt. "My wife is having an affair. She pawned family jewelry to buy her boyfriend motorcycle tires. I have video evidence of them meeting regularly at a local bar." Meredith raised an eyebrow but didn't seem surprised. After 30 years of family law, probably nothing surprised her anymore. Affairs don't automatically mean custody changes," she said, plugging in the drive. "Courts want to see evidence that the relationship is detrimental to the children's welfare." She's lying to them. Missing dinners, leaving them with neighbors without notice. Yesterday, Emma asked me why Mom's phone is more important than family time. That's better. Document everything. Missed meals, forgotten obligations, times she's absent when she should be supervising the kids. Meredith clicked through the video files, pausing on clear shots of Kara and Duke entering the tavern together. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 2 weeks that I can prove. Probably longer." "Any pills or alcohol involvement?" "Not that I've seen, but the bar isn't exactly a family establishment." Meredith leaned back in her chair. "Here's what you need to know. Texas courts favor joint custody unless there's evidence of neglect, offense, or moral unfitness. What you've shown me suggests poor judgment and possible abandonment of parental duties, but you'll need more. Like what? Financial irresponsibility, which the pawn shop receipt helps establish, putting the children in unsafe situations. Pattern of prioritizing this relationship over family obligations." She closed the laptop. How often is she leaving the kids unsupervised? Twice this week, Emma had to walk to the neighbors after school because Kara wasn't home. Jake's been making his own dinners. Document it all. Times, dates, circumstances. Get statements from neighbors if they're willing. Meredith pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes. Emergency custody orders can be granted if you can show immediate risk to the children's welfare. How immediate? If she takes them around this biker crowd, if she's driving recklessly with them in the car, if she's leaving them alone for extended periods. She looked up from her notes. But Ray, understand what you're starting here. Once we file, there's no going back. This becomes public record. The whole town will know. I thought about that helmet hitting the asphalt, about Emma asking why Mom didn't care anymore, about the replacement necklace sitting in my toolbox like evidence of everything Kara had thrown away. File the papers, I said. I'll need a retainer. $5,000 to start. I wrote the check without hesitation. Some repairs cost more than others, but they were always worth it if they kept something important from breaking down completely. That afternoon, I started keeping a journal. Nothing fancy, just a small notebook I carried in my shirt pocket. Every time Kara was late, every missed dinner, every occasion when the kids had to fend for themselves, it all went in the book. By Thursday, I had 6 entries. By the following Monday, I had 12. The pattern was clear, even to someone who didn't want to see it. My wife had checked out of our family, and she was taking pieces of our life with her every time she climbed onto Duke Renner's motorcycle. The call came Tuesday afternoon while I was replacing brake pads on the Henderson truck. Tommy again, voice tight with the kind of nervousness that meant bad news. Ray, she's here again. Same guy. They're sitting right outside my shop. Through the phone, I could hear the Harley's engine idling. She say what she wants? Haven't talked to them. Just thought you should know. A pause. Want me to keep them busy? I could invent some problem with the last tire job, make them wait around. The offer was tempting. Part of me wanted to race over there, drag Kara out of whatever conversation she was having with Duke, and settle this thing once and for all. But Meredith's advice echoed in my head. Document everything, build the case, let the legal system do what confrontation couldn't. Nah, let them be. But Tommy? If you see anything that looks dangerous, them drinking, riding reckless, anything like that, give me a call. Will do, boss. I hung up and added another entry to my notebook. 2:15 p.m., Kara at motorcycle shop with Duke Renner again. Third time this week. The journal had become a ritual, each entry another nail in the coffin of my marriage. Last night she'd missed Jake's school play because she was running errands. Saturday, she'd left Emma to babysit while she took a mysterious 4-hour drive to visit a friend. Sunday dinner had been takeout pizza because she'd forgotten to shop. For groceries, each absence, each broken promise, each time she chose Duke over her own family, it all went in the book. That evening, Meredith called with an update on the legal filings. I've drafted the initial custody petition, she said. Emergency temporary orders based on abandonment and financial irresponsibility. The pawn shop incident gives us grounds for immediate action. How fast can this move? If we file tomorrow, we could have a hearing within 10 days. But Ray, you need to understand what happens next. Once we serve Kara with papers, she'll know exactly what you're planning. She might try to take the kids, disappear for a while, make this more complicated. I thought about that. What if we don't serve her until we're ready to move on everything at once? Riskier, but possible. We need to coordinate with local law enforcement, make sure the kids are safe when we execute the custody order. Do it. After hanging up, I sat in my truck outside the house for 20 minutes, watching the lit windows of the life I was about to dismantle. Emma's room, where she was probably doing homework or texting friends. Jake's room, where he was likely playing video games or reading. The kitchen window, where Kara was probably sitting with her phone, texting Duke about their next rendezvous. Inside, dinner was the usual uncomfortable silence punctuated by the kids' attempts at normal conversation. Dad, can we go camping this weekend? Jake asked. Tommy Morrison's family is going to the lake. We'll see, son. I might have to work. Kara looked up from her phone. Since when do you work weekends? Since my wife started funding her boyfriend's lifestyle and abandoning our children, I thought. But out loud, I just said, business has been good lately. A lot of repairs backed up. She shrugged and went back to texting. After the kids went upstairs, I found myself in the garage again, organizing tools that didn't need organizing. The familiar weight of wrenches and sockets in my hands, the smell of oil and metal and honest work. This was what I understood: fixing things that were broken, making them work the way they were supposed to. But some things couldn't be fixed. Some things had to be replaced entirely. Wednesday morning brought news that changed everything. Tommy called before I'd even opened the shop, voice excited. "Ray, you're not going to believe this. That Harley? Duke's trying to sell it." "What?" "Posted it on Facebook Marketplace this morning. Says he needs cash fast. Asking $8,000 for a bike that's worth at least 12. I felt something click into place, like the last piece of a complicated repair finally fitting where it belonged. Duke was broke. The expensive tires, probably other upgrades and repairs. Kara's pawn shop money hadn't been enough. He was liquidating assets, which meant this relationship was about more than thrill-seeking. It was about money. My money, filtered through my wife's desperation to keep some leather-jacketed loser interested in her middle-aged fantasies. "Tommy, do me a favor. Screenshot that posting, send it to me." Already did. Also got the listing details. He's meeting potential buyers at Iron Run tomorrow afternoon. Perfect. Tomorrow I'd have my confrontation, but not the kind Kara was expecting. Not the kind anyone was expecting. Iron Run Tavern at 4 o'clock on a Thursday looked like the kind of place where bad decisions came to die. Neon beer signs flickered in grimy windows, and the parking lot was half full of pickups and motorcycles that had seen better decades. I sat in my truck across the street, watching Kara's Honda pull into the lot beside Duke's Harley. She climbed out wearing tight jeans and a low-cut top I'd never seen before, probably bought with whatever was left of her grandmother's necklace money. They went inside together, Duke's hand possessive on her back. Through the window, I could see them settling into a corner booth, heads bent close in conversation, probably planning their next move, their next scam, their next way to bleed my family dry for the sake of his chrome and her cheap thrills. I gave them 10 minutes to get comfortable, then I climbed out of my truck and walked across the street. The interior of Iron Run looked like every other biker bar I'd ever seen. Dim lighting, sticky floors, the kind of atmosphere that made everything seem seedier than it probably was. The conversation died when I walked in wearing my work shirt with Ray stitched on the pocket, grease still under my fingernails from the morning's repairs. Kara froze with a beer halfway to her lips. Duke looked up, confusion flickering across his face before settling into the kind of artificial toughness that came from too many movies and not enough real confrontation. I walked over to their table, pulled out the third chair, and sat down like I'd been invited. "Afternoon," I said. "Ray." Kara's voice was tight. "What are you doing here?" "Thought I'd come see where my money's been going." Duke leaned forward. "Your money? $800 necklace, pawned for $450, expensive motorcycle tires bought with the proceeds." I looked directly at him. "Unless you're claiming you paid for those tires yourself?" The bar had gone completely quiet. Every patron, every bartender, everyone in the place was watching this play out like dinner theater. "You need to leave," Kara hissed. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Not half as much as you are." I kept my voice level, conversational. "Sit." She'd started to rise, but something in my tone made her settle back into the booth. Duke tried to stand. "Listen, man, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but..." I looked at him. Just looked at him the way I'd look at a stripped bolt or a seized engine, like a problem that could be solved with the right tools and enough patience. He sat back down. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to finish your drinks quietly, then you're going to walk out of here and pretend this conversation never happened. Because if you don't, things are going to get a lot more complicated for both of you." "You can't just..." Kara started. "I can, and I am." I pulled out my phone, showed them the screen with the timestamp and video file ready to play. Security cameras are everywhere these days. Amazing what they pick up. Duke's face had gone pale under his tan. "What do you want?" "I want you to stay away from my wife and my family. Period." "And if I don't?" I smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Then everyone in this town gets to see exactly how you've been funding your lifestyle. Including your parole officer." That last part was a guess, but the way Duke's jaw clenched told me I'd hit the mark. I stood up, dropped a 20 on the table to cover their drinks. Have a nice evening, folks. The silence followed me all the way to the door. Behind me, I could hear the whispered conversation starting, the sound of phone cameras clicking as people documented the aftermath. By the time I reached my truck, 3 people had already posted about it on Facebook. By Friday morning, the video was everywhere. Jake Morrison, no relation to Tommy, despite the name, had been sitting 2 tables away at Iron Run, phone in hand when I walked in. His shaky footage captured the entire confrontation, from my calm entrance to Duke's pale-faced retreat. Husband confronts cheating wife at biker bar, read the caption when Sarah Chen shared it to the Iron County Community Facebook group. By breakfast, it had 47 comments and 18 shares. I discovered this while drinking coffee in my office, scrolling through notifications on my phone. The shop wouldn't open for another hour, but I'd been awake since 5, unable to sleep after yesterday's confrontation. The comments were brutal in the way only small-town social media could be. About time someone stood up to Duke Renner. Poor Ray. Always seemed like such a good guy. Kara Callan should be ashamed of herself. Did you see how fast that biker backed down when Ray looked at him? Mixed in with the supportive messages were the inevitable gossips and troublemakers, but even they seemed to be on my side. Apparently, trading family heirlooms for motorcycle parts was a bridge too far, even for the busybodies who usually thrived on marriage drama. My phone buzzed with a text from Meredith. Saw the video. We need to talk. An hour later, she was sitting across from my desk, tablet in hand, scrolling through the social media explosion. This changes things, she said. Public knowledge of the affair, documented evidence of your confrontation, community support clearly on your side. Good changes or bad changes? Mostly good. Courts like to see restrained behavior from the parent seeking custody. You didn't yell, didn't threaten violence, didn't create a scene. You stated facts and left. She looked up from the tablet. But it also means Kara knows you're serious now. She might try to take the kids and run. Where would she go? She's got maybe $300 in her checking account and no family left. People do stupid things when they're desperate. We need to move fast on the custody filing. Meredith gathered her papers. I'm filing the emergency petition this morning. If all goes well, we'll have a hearing date by Monday. After she left, I tried to focus on work, but the phone kept ringing. Customers wanting to know if I was okay, friends offering support, even a few people I barely knew calling to say they'd seen the video and thought I'd handled myself well. Around noon, Tommy showed up with lunch from the diner and a grin wider than the grill on his pickup. Man, you should see the talk around town. Everyone's saying how you kept your cool, how you didn't let that biker punk intimidate you. He set down the bag of sandwiches. Duke hasn't been seen since yesterday. Word is he's staying out at the Riverside Motel. And Kara? Haven't seen her either. Her car's been at the house since last night, though. I thought about that. Kara holed up at home, probably fielding calls from friends and relatives who'd seen the video. Probably texting frantically with Duke, trying to figure out their next move. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Emma, home early from school with a study hall pass, pushing through the shop's front door with the determined expression she'd inherited from her grandmother. Dad, we need to talk. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and gestured toward my office. She closed the door behind us and sat in the client chair like she was conducting business. I saw the video. Emma, I can explain. You don't need to. Her voice was steady, older than her 16 years. Mom's been lying to us for weeks. Jake knows it. I know it. We're not stupid. I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot I hadn't realized was there. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. At least we found out. She leaned forward. Dad, what's going to happen? I don't know yet, sweetheart, but I promise you and Jake will be safe. Whatever else happens, that comes first. She nodded, blinking back tears she was too proud to shed. Can we stay with you? I mean, when this gets settled? If that's what you want. It is. Jake, too, we talked about it. After Emma left to catch her bus, I sat alone in my office thinking about the weight of promises and the price of keeping them. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and court filings and the formal dissolution of everything I'd built with Kara. But tonight, my kids knew where they belonged, and that was worth more than all the necklaces in the world. Monday morning arrived with court papers and the metallic taste of finality. Meredith met me at the courthouse steps at 8 a.m. sharp, briefcase in hand, wearing the same no-nonsense expression she'd probably worn to 1,000 family law hearings. "Emergency petition filed, hearing scheduled for 10 a.m., she said. "Judge Peterson's docket. He's fair but doesn't tolerate games." Inside, the courthouse smelled like floor wax and stale coffee. We took seats in the gallery while other cases played out ahead of us. Custody disputes and divorce proceedings that all seemed to follow the same dreary script of broken promises and divided assets. At 9:45, Kara walked in with a court-appointed attorney who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She'd dressed conservatively, navy dress, minimal makeup, but couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the nervous way she kept checking her phone. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Peterson." Peterson was a gray-haired man in his 60s who'd been handling family law since before I was married. He reviewed our filing with the methodical attention of someone who'd seen every variation of human failure that could land in his courtroom. "Mr. Callan, I've reviewed your emergency petition for temporary custody. You're alleging abandonment and financial irresponsibility by the respondent?" "Yes, Your Honor." Meredith stood. "We have documented evidence of Mrs. Callan pawning family jewelry to fund her extramarital relationship, repeatedly leaving minor children unsupervised, and missing family obligations." "Mrs. Callan, how do you respond?" Kara's lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, my client admits to some marital difficulties, but maintains she has never endangered the welfare of her children. The alleged abandonment consists of brief afternoon absences while the children were at school." Judge Peterson looked at the evidence folder. "I see video surveillance, pawn shop receipts, and a detailed log of missed parental responsibilities. Mrs. Callan, do you dispute the authenticity of this evidence?" Kara leaned over to whisper something to her lawyer, who shook his head. "No, Your Honor. But we maintain that temporary marital separation does not constitute grounds for emergency custody modification. The pawning of family jewelry to fund an extramarital relationship suggests poor judgment regarding family finances," Peterson said dryly. "And I see here that minor children were left unsupervised on multiple occasions while Mrs. Callan was engaged in this relationship." He closed the folder. "I'm granting temporary custody to Mr. Callan pending a full hearing in 60 days. Mrs. Callan will have supervised visitation rights every other weekend, with supervision provided by a court-approved third party." The gavel came down with the sound of everything ending. Kara's face crumpled. She turned toward me, mouth opening to say something, but her lawyer grabbed her arm and steered her toward the exit. Outside on the courthouse steps, Meredith handed me copies of the custody order. "Congratulations. Your kids are legally safe. What happens next?" "Full custody hearing in 2 months. We'll present a complete case, financial records, character witnesses, evidence of abandonment. If Kara doesn't contest it, this temporary order becomes permanent." I folded the papers and slid them into my jacket pocket. Legal vindication felt different than I'd expected. Less triumphant, more like the end of a long repair job where you'd had to replace more parts than you'd hoped. "Ray!" Kara's voice stopped me halfway to my truck. She was standing alone on the sidewalk, her lawyer already gone, looking smaller than I'd seen her in 20 years. "Please, can we talk?" Meredith touched my arm. "You don't have to." "It's fine." I walked back toward Kara, stopping a careful distance away. "What do you want?" "I want to see my kids. The court order allows supervised visits." "Every other weekend." "That's not what I mean, and you know it." Her voice cracked. "Ray, I made mistakes, I know that. But they're my children, too." "Then you should have thought about that before you traded your grandmother's necklace for motorcycle tires." She flinched, like I'd slapped her. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How is it supposed to happen, Kara? You were going to keep sneaking around indefinitely? Keep lying to Emma and Jake about where their mother disappears to every afternoon?" I was confused. I felt trapped, like I was just your wife and their mother, and nothing else mattered about me. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. "So you decided to matter to Duke Renner instead?" It wasn't about him. It was about his bike, about feeling young again, feeling wanted. I get it, Kara. What I don't get is why our kids had to pay for your midlife crisis. She started crying then, the messy kind of tears that ruined makeup and left mascara tracks down cheeks. A year ago, those tears would have broken my heart. "Now they just made me tired. I'll fight this," she said. "I'll get a better lawyer, contest the custody order. With what money?" You've got maybe $300 left, and Duke's probably moved on to the next desperate housewife by now. The words were cruel, but they were also true, and truth was all I had left to offer her. I walked back to my truck and drove home to tell my kids that their mother wouldn't be coming home anymore. The house felt different that evening. Emptier, but somehow more solid, like a building after you've removed the rotting supports and replaced them with steel. Emma and Jake took the news better than I'd expected. Maybe because they'd already figured out most of it on their own, or maybe because 16 and 12 was old enough to recognize the difference between a parent who was physically present and one who was actually there. "So, Mom can't live here anymore?" Jake asked. He was sprawled on the living room carpet, homework spread around him like he was building a fort out of math worksheets. "Not right now, son. The court says she needs to prove she can be a good parent first." "What if she can't prove it?" I looked at my boy, really looked at him. When had he gotten so tall? When had his voice started changing? How much of his growing up had I missed while I was busy working and Kara was busy destroying our family? "Then it'll just be us three for a while. We'll figure it out." Emma looked up from her phone. "Dad, are you okay?" Like, really okay? The question caught me off guard. In all the legal maneuvering and documentation and courtroom drama, no one had asked me that simple question. "I'm getting there, sweetheart. Some days are harder than others." "It's okay to be sad," she said. "Even when someone hurts you, it's okay to miss them." Smart kid. Too smart, maybe, for her own good. But then again, kids had to grow up fast when their parents forgot how to act like adults. Tuesday brought a phone call I wasn't expecting. Tommy, voice tight with the kind of excitement that usually meant either very good news or very bad news. "Ray, you need to get down here. Now." "What's wrong?" "Just come. And Ray, bring your camera." I locked up the shop and drove to Tommy's place, a converted gas station on the edge of town where he ran his tire and quick lube business. His bay doors were open, and I could see him standing beside a familiar Harley, Duke's bike. But Duke was nowhere to be seen. "Where'd this come from?" I asked. "Tow truck dropped it off an hour ago, repo company out of Houston." "Seems our friend Duke missed a few payments." I walked around the motorcycle, noting the expensive tires Tommy had mounted just weeks ago. Chrome still gleaming, leather seat still pristine. A $12,000 toy that Duke couldn't afford to keep. What happens to it now? Bank takes it back, sells it at auction, probably get half what it's worth. Tommy grinned. Funny thing is, the repo notice had Duke's address. Riverside Motel, room 12. Same room he's been paying for by the week since Thursday. So Duke was broke, hiding out at a cheap motel, and had just lost his primary means of impressing middle-aged women with more money than sense. The dominoes were falling faster than I'd expected. "Tommy, do me a favor. If Duke shows up looking for the bike, don't tell him I was here. Let him figure out his own problems." "You got it, boss." I took photos of the repossessed Harley and sent them to Meredith with a brief explanation. More evidence of Duke's financial instability, more proof that Kara's affair had been built on nothing more substantial than chrome and wishful thinking. That evening, I started going through our financial records. Bank statements, credit card bills, investment accounts, laying out 20 years of shared money management to see how much damage Kara's confusion had actually caused. The pawnshop receipt was just the beginning. Over the past 3 months, she'd made cash advances on credit cards I didn't know she had, withdrawn money from Emma's college fund, and run up nearly $4,000 in charges at bars, restaurants, and a motorcycle gear shop in Houston. $4,000. Enough to fix 10 transmissions or replace the shop's hydraulic lift, or pay for Jake's entire school year. Instead, it had gone toward funding a fantasy that had lasted exactly as long as Duke's ability to make bike payments. I spread the statements across the kitchen table like evidence in a crime scene, which, in a way, they were. The crime of stealing from your own family's future to pay for someone else's present. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me tomorrow at Murphy's, 7 p.m. Kara, texting from some borrowed phone since I'd blocked her regular number after the courthouse confrontation. I stared at the message for a full minute, thumb hovering over the delete button. But curiosity won out over caution. What could she possibly have to say that would change anything? I texted back, "Fine. But this is the last conversation we're having outside of court." Murphy's Shell at 7 p.m. was nearly deserted. Just a few cars getting gas and the kind of tired travelers who stop at highway stations because they're tired of driving, not because they need anything particular. I parked near the air pump and waited. Kara's Honda pulled in 5 minutes later, followed by a pickup truck I didn't recognize. Duke climbed out of the passenger seat, looking like a man who'd been living in cheap motels and eating gas station food. So much for meeting alone. They approached my truck together, Kara slightly ahead like she was leading the charge. She'd lost weight in the past week, and not in a healthy way. Her clothes hung loose, and she had the jittery energy of someone running on caffeine in desperation. I rolled down my window but didn't get out. Say what you came to say. Ray, please. Can't we work this out like adults? Kara's voice had taken on a pleading quality I'd never heard before. The kids need both their parents. The kids need parents they can trust. Parents who don't lie to them about where grocery money goes? Duke stepped forward, trying to reclaim some of the swagger he'd lost at Iron Run. Look, man, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. I looked at him with the same expression I'd give a customer who brought me an engine held together with duct tape and prayer. Did you pay me back for those tires yet? What? I pulled out the invoice I'd printed that morning. Itemized bill for motorcycle tire mounting and balancing, plus shop fees, plus a surcharge for services rendered to deadbeats. Total, $1,247. Your girlfriend stole family jewelry to pay for your bike repairs. I'm billing you for the full replacement cost. Duke's face flushed red. You can't be serious. Completely serious. You've got 30 days to pay or I turn it over to collections. That's not legal. You can't just, actually I can. Theft by deception, receiving stolen goods, fraud, take your pick. I handed the invoice through the window. My lawyer thinks we've got a solid case. Kara grabbed the paper from Duke's hands. Ray, this is insane. We're family. We can work through this. We were family until you decided to pawn it. I made mistakes. People make mistakes. People make mistakes, I agreed. But adults take responsibility for them. Adults don't steal from their children's college funds to impress some loser with a motorcycle. Duke's hands clenched into fists. Watch your mouth. I smiled at him through the window. Not a pleasant smile. Or what, you'll hit me? In front of witnesses? With an assault charge hanging over your head already? And that was another guess, but again, Duke's expression told me I'd hit home. Come on, baby, he muttered to Kara. This isn't worth it. Guy's obviously lost his mind. But Kara wasn't ready to give up. She pressed closer to my window, desperation making her voice shrill. The kids miss me, Ray. Emma called me crying yesterday. Emma called you to ask why you never fought for them. Why you chose some stranger over your own family. The lie came easily, but it had the ring of truth. What did you tell her? Kara's face crumpled. That's not, you never what? Never thought about how this would affect them. Never considered that your actions have consequences? I started the engine. This conversation is over. Ray, wait. She grabbed the window frame as I began to back up. Please, I'll do anything. I'll go to counseling. I'll break it off with Duke. You'll what? Promise to be faithful? Promise to put our kids first? You already made those promises 22 years ago. I put the truck in drive. Some things can't be fixed, Kara. They can only be replaced. In my rearview mirror, I watched her collapse against Duke's chest, sobbing like a child who'd finally realized the toy store was closed and no amount of crying would open it again. Duke stood there awkwardly patting her back, looking around the gas station like he was hoping someone would tell him what to do next. But there was no one. Just a broken woman, a broke man, and the wreckage of choices that couldn't be undone. I drove home to my kids, who were waiting with homework and questions about dinner, and all the ordinary chaos of a family that was learning how to function without the person who should have been its heart. Some repairs took longer than others. But we were getting there. 2 weeks later, Duke Renner left town in the same pickup truck he'd arrived in, taking nothing but a duffel bag and whatever pride he had left. Tommy heard it from the desk clerk at Riverside Motel. Duke had checked out before dawn, leaving behind a week's worth of unpaid rent and a reputation that would follow him to whatever town was unlucky enough to be his next stop. Kara lasted another 3 days. I was replacing the transmission in Sarah Peterson's sedan when Emma came into the shop after school, face flushed from running. Dad, Mom's car isn't at the house anymore. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and followed her outside. Sure enough, the red Honda that had been parked in our driveway since the court hearing was gone. Maybe she's at the store, I said, but we both knew better. Emma pulled out her phone. I'll call her. The call went straight to voicemail. So did the second one, and the third. By evening, I was starting to worry despite myself. Kara might be a liar and a cheat, but she wasn't the type to just disappear without a word. At least, the woman I'd married 22 years ago hadn't been. The mystery solved itself the next morning when Meredith called. Kara's attorney contacted me. She's waiving her visitation rights and won't contest the custody order. What does that mean? It means she's giving up legal claim to the children. Permanently. I sat down heavily in my office chair. Did she say why? The message just said she felt it was in the children's best interests and that she wouldn't be available for the full custody hearing. Meredith's voice was carefully neutral. Ray, people don't usually walk away from their kids without a reason. Financial pressure, legal troubles, something forcing their hand. Or guilt. Maybe. Either way, if she signs the final paperwork, you'll have full custody with no strings attached. No visitation schedules, no court supervision, no ongoing legal fees. After hanging up, I sat alone in my shop for a long time, surrounded by the familiar sounds of honest work and productive labor. Somewhere out there, Kara was driving toward whatever future she thought she deserved. And here, Emma and Jake were finishing their homework and planning weekend activities with a father who would actually be there. The papers arrived by courier service Friday afternoon. Kara's signature at the bottom of each page, witnessed and notarized, legally transferring full custody of our children to me. No explanation, no goodbye letter, no forwarding address. Just her name, signed 23 times, and the sound of a door closing forever. That evening, I called Emma and Jake into the living room for what I privately thought of as the last family meeting we'd ever need to have about their mother. Kids, I got some legal papers today. Your mom has officially given up her parental rights. Emma nodded like she'd been expecting this. Jake looked confused. What does that mean? He asked. It means I'm your only parent now, legally speaking. She won't be coming back. Ever? The question hung in the air like smoke from a blown engine. I wanted to soften it, to leave some door open for the future, but these kids had been through enough lies. I don't know, son. Maybe someday when you're older, if you want to find her, we can talk about it. But for now, it's just us three. Jake was quiet for a minute, processing this information the way kids do. Not with the emotional weight adults assign to it, but as simply another fact to file away with all the other facts that made up his world. Are you sad, Dad? Sometimes. But mostly I'm proud of how strong you both are, how you've handled all of this. Emma leaned over and hugged me, fierce and protective. We're going to be okay. Yeah, I said, meaning it for the first time since this whole mess started. We are. 6 months later, the shop was busier than it had ever been. Word travels fast in a small town, and apparently my reputation for handling difficult situations with quiet competence extended to fixing cars. Customers came from 3 counties over, bringing transmission problems and engine troubles they trusted me to solve. Emma had started helping out after school, showing the same instinctive understanding of machinery that had skipped her mother entirely. Jake preferred the business side, organizing invoices and updating customer records with the methodical attention to detail that reminded me of myself at his age. We'd settled into routines that worked. Breakfast together before school, dinner together every night, weekend camping trips to the lake where we taught ourselves to fish and told stories around campfires that smelled like home. The house felt right now, not empty, but peaceful. Not broken, but rebuilt with stronger materials. I was closing up the shop late Thursday evening when I noticed the necklace hanging on the pegboard above my workbench. Kara's grandmother's replacement, still in its velvet box, gathering dust like a monument to poor choices and expensive lessons. For 6 months, I'd looked at it every day without really seeing it. A reminder of betrayal, of trust broken and family damaged. But tonight, looking at it in the fluorescent light of my shop, I saw something different. I saw proof that some things were worth replacing. That when something precious gets pawned away for less than it's worth, you don't have to accept the loss. You can find something better, something that fits the life you're actually building, rather than the fantasy someone else wants to live. I took the necklace down from its hook and walked to the industrial trash bin in the corner of the shop. For a moment, I held it over the opening, feeling the weight of everything it represented. Then, I changed my mind. Emma might want it someday. Not as a replacement for her grandmother's heirloom, but as something else entirely. Evidence that her father had fought for what mattered. Proof that when someone tries to steal your family's future, you don't have to let them keep it. I put the necklace in my desk drawer, next to the custody papers and the shop's lease agreement and all the other documents that formed the foundation of our new life. Outside, a motorcycle roared past on the highway, some other fool chasing some other fantasy that would probably cost more than he could afford. I listened to the sound fade into the distance, then turned off the lights and locked the shop. At home, Emma was helping Jake with algebra homework at the kitchen table, their heads bent together over problems that had solutions you could find if you just worked through them step by step. "How was your day, Dad?" Emma asked without looking up from Jake's textbook. "Good. Productive?" I hung my keys on the hook by the door. "Who's hungry?" They both raised their hands, and I realized that this was what winning looked like. Not dramatic courtroom victories or public confrontations, but ordinary Thursday nights with children who knew their father would always come home. I started pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, planning the meal we'd share before Emma went to her job at the library, and Jake retreated to his room for video games and the serious business of growing up. In 6 months, we'd gone from a family held together by habit and fear to one built on choice and respect. It had cost me a marriage, a fortune in legal fees, and whatever naive faith I'd once had in promises people make when they're young and think love conquers everything. But looking at my children working together at the kitchen table, listening to Emma explain quadratic equations with the patient precision of someone who understood that knowledge was something you shared rather than hoarded, I knew I'd made the right trade. Some engines couldn't be rebuilt, but you could always build better ones from scratch. I opened a can of tomato sauce and started heating oil in the skillet, thinking about dinner and homework and all the ordinary miracles that filled the space where chaos used to live. Behind me, Jake laughed at something Emma said, and the sound echoed through the house like the promise I'd made 6 months ago finally coming true. We were going to be okay.